What if part of your home wasn't for living, but for displaying the things you care about the most? For some people, cars are more than just transportation. They become collector items, objects of craft and engineering, and a lot of times the memory of collecting that. They represent different eras, different technologies, sometimes even different chapters of their life. And when the collection grows large enough, it begins to deserve a space of its own. Today's project is a real design for a real client, and unlike the last garage I designed, where the owner actively worked on his vehicles, this client is primarily a collector, someone who maintains the cars carefully, but also wants a place where the collection can be experienced. A building located on the property adjacent to the client's main residence, and not intended necessarily to replace the home, but to complement it. A place to step away for a while and enjoy the collection. And if we're being honest, it's a place that allows the collection to be seen and maybe shown off a little bit. Most garages are designed sort of as support spaces to serve the house. They're often secondary in scale and experience, just a bland, concrete, and walled area. But for a collector, the hierarchy begins to shift a little bit. The garage became the destination, not simply just a container for the vehicles, but a space designed specifically around them. And in this case, the client already had a primary residence nearby, so the building didn't need to perform every function of a typical house. It didn't need a large kitchen and multiple bedrooms and a formal living space. Instead, it needed to do very few things, and it needed to do them very well. Providing space for approximately 10 or 12 collector vehicles seems easy, but with the less restraints, it actually becomes more difficult to make the right decisions. We also did need to include just some basic things like a small little kitchen, a bathroom, and a pantry, and upstairs mezzanine and loft for some overnight stays occasionally. We wanted to also create an architectural presence that feels appropriate alongside the existing home, a place to go to and retreat, but also a place that kind of quietly communicates something about what's inside. The first step in my design process was understanding how the cars themselves would shape the layout. Typical vehicle requires 9 feet wide, 18 feet deep, that's your parking spot. But collectors rarely want vehicles packed tightly together. The experience of the collection depends on being able to move around the cars and see them from multiple perspectives, to open both doors fully and have plenty of room. And occasionally they'll reposition one without needing to move every vehicle in the room. So the plan begins to take on a bit of rhythm from that. Rows of vehicles arranged with intentional spacing, circulation paths that allow movement through the collection, and visual clarity across the floor plate. Rather than filling the building edge to edge, there's moments of openness to allow the collection to breathe. Support spaces begin to locate themselves along the perimeter of the plan. Like I said, a compact kitchen, a bathroom, and a pantry, that's really it. Spaces that allow the building to function independently when needed, without taking away focus from the primary purpose. The collection remains the central idea. Because the collection of cars is the primary experience of the building, maintaining visual continuity across a floor becomes important. Because walls can interrupt the sort of reading of the space, so enclosed rooms are positioned strategically, allowing the majority of the floor area to remain open. This creates flexibility over time for when the collections change, vehicles come and go. The architecture should be able to adapt without requiring any major alterations. And the kitchen becomes more of a supporting feature than a focal point. Maybe it's a place to grab a coffee or pause. Maybe just have a small conversation, just enough to make the space comfortable without competing with the collection itself. And when architecture aligns with that intended lifestyle, the space often feels more natural. It's less forced and more resolved. One sort of unique feature in this project was the inclusion of a hardened safe room. Part of this decision comes from practical considerations. In many regions, especially this area, storm shelters are becoming an increasingly common request. Providing a reinforced space, it offers peace of mind during severe weather events. But in this case, it also served a bit of additional purpose. Collectors often accumulate items of significance, documentation, rare parts or components, objects that are difficult or impossible to replace, and a hard space just provides that additional layer of protection. Architecturally, these rooms introduce specific requirements: thicker walls, careful coordination with the structure, limited openings, yet they still need to feel integrated into the overall design. Even highly technical elements can contribute to the narrative of the building, when they're considered early on in the process like this was. The second floor is intentionally compact. A single bedroom with an ensuite bathroom, some closet space, a washer and dryer, everything needed for like short stays or extended time spent on the property. Because this building sits next to their primary residence, it doesn't need to replicate the full program of the house. Instead, it provides just enough living function to allow the client to spend meaningful time with the collection. The defining feature of the second floor, though, is this open loft overlooking the garage below. From above, the vehicles become part of the daily visual environment. It's a constant connection between living space and collection space. This relationship reinforces the central idea of the project. The cars aren't hidden away like you would have in a typical garage. They're part of the architecture itself. As the exterior form began to take shape, the goal was to create something that felt appropriate within its context. Because the building sits near the client's primary residence, it's important that it felt related without feeling completely identical. A complementary architectural language helps the structure feel grounded on the property. Proportions align with the scale of the nearby house, the roof forms relate without directly copying it, and material transitions, they create visual continuity across the site. Garages often benefit from a sense of solidity, like clear structure and simple massing, forms that feel stable and enduring. Rather than introducing unnecessary complexity, the focus remains on proportion and balance. That allows the presence of the collection to remain the primary visual richness of this project. The material selection on this focuses on durability and clarity, obviously, but polished floors, they provide resilience over time, but they also offer a subtle reflection as you look at it of the car so that it reinforces sort of the presence of the vehicle. The steel structural elements, they express precision and honesty. It's still a garage. Connections, they remain visible where appropriate, allowing the building to communicate how it's assembled. Wall surfaces, they're going to remain restrained. Neutral tones, they're going to allow the vehicles themselves to provide variation and visual interest. Because the collection is going to change and evolve, so the architecture, it should remain adaptable and become a background to the collection. These material choices avoid unnecessary ornament. Instead, they provide a calm background that allows the objects inside to remain the focal point. In some ways, this building becomes more like a frame for artwork, carefully proportioned container for collection over time. So as you approach the building from the property, the structure sort of reveals itself gradually. Its presence feels consistent with the nearby residence, but its purpose becomes more apparent as you move closer. Large areas of glass face towards the main house, allowing the interior to be visible before even entering. And the collection begins to present itself through the facade, almost like a crystal jewel box. Objects visible through layers of transparency. As the doors open, the full volume of the space becomes transparent. Vehicles arranged with intention, clear circulation paths between them, moments of alignment where multiple cars can be seen simultaneously. The openness of the plan allows the collection to be experienced as a whole, rather than just individual storage spaces. Moving through the garage, the perspective shifts a bit. Those reflections start to appear across a polished floor surface, and each vehicle reveals different qualities from different vantage points. And as you look up, the loft creates a visual connection between the levels. The living space above remains just present and it's accessible, but secondary to the primary experience below. And when you move upstairs, the perspective changes again. The collection becomes something almost landscape-like, a field of forms and shapes and surfaces, objects that carry stories and memories. The bedroom remains intentionally simple, a place to step away while remaining visually connected to the space below. And the architecture supports that experience without competing for attention. Projects like this explore a different dimension of architecture for me, not just designing for shelter, but really designing for meaning. Collections often represent years of searching and years of patience and work and appreciation for craft and detail. Architecture can either separate those objects from your daily life, or they can bring them closer into the everyday experience. In this case, the building allows the collection to be both personal and present, a place to enjoy privately or occasionally to share with others. Spaces sometimes communicate values even before a word is spoken. And when architecture aligns with what someone cares about most, the result often feels intentional and more complete. This project began with a simple idea. What if the collection became a starting point for design rather than an afterthought? When architecture begins with what matters most to the person using the space, the results are going to feel more personal. They're going to be more specific and more grounded. Thanks for taking the time to explore this project with me. And as always, stay curious and design with intent.